do you make of that direct appeal from Sir Richard Moore to Russians who are clearly not happy with President Putin's regime and the war in Ukraine?
Well, I think it makes perfect sense to do something like that. You never know how these things are going to turn out, and an organization like Secret Intelligence Service always has to be on the lookout for opportunities to recruit agents wherever it can. So for C to speak out as he did in Prague, I think makes perfect sense. It may well tip some people who are teetering on the brink over the edge into coming forward and making themselves known.
It is quite a different approach, isn't it? Clearly, the intelligence services have opened up somewhat over the past few years, but it's not so long ago that we didn't even know who the head of MI6, actually was. And there used to be these stories of the secret tap on the shoulder to make this open appeal over the airwaves. I mean, is that going to work?
Well, I don't know, and I'm sure C doesn't, can't be sure either. But the fact is that intelligence services have come a long way into the daylight from the Cold War, and this was intentional. I think we recognise when the Cold War was over that an organisation like SIS's relationship with the public was going to have to change. And there has been a progressive opening up in areas where it's safe to do it. The important thing is, however, that what really matters, sources and methods, remain secret.
It did sound from what he was saying that Sir Richard Moore was suggesting that some disaffected Russians had already defected. I mean, clearly there is such brutal suppression of any dissent to the war that it's very difficult to gauge these things. But what do you sense is the scale of the growing disenchantment which we seem to be detecting at President Putin?
It's very difficult to know for certain what's happening in a country like Russia at the moment, but I think the events of the last few weeks have shown that there are cracks in the system. I mean, look, when Putin took the decision to invade Ukraine, he only told a small handful of people, and even those people, I think, in many cases, went along very reluctantly with this decision. For most of Russia's elite, this came as a bombshell, this decision. And it's been quite clear from the outset that a lot of people in the elite are very unhappy. Many in Russia's ordinary population have bought into Putin's narrative because their only real source of news is Russian state media, TV and radio. But I think the elite who are more aware of the world outside are generally pretty dismayed.
And do you think that we are already getting quite a bit of intelligence out of Russia on the scale of that dissent and the mounting problems for President Putin? I mean, only today we saw an explosion on a Russian military base in Crimea. Of course, there was the attack on the Kerch Bridge. I mean, those sorts of setbacks to his military operation are one aspect of it. But then you've seen this growing sense of disarray amongst senior Russian military commanders. Prigozhin, of course, launching that brief rebellion, but other senior military figures speaking out and voicing their criticism of the president.
Indeed, I think over a dozen senior military commanders have been relieved of their posts in the recent past, and that I think is very telling. It's very difficult to know how these things are going to play out. I can't remember whether it was Trotsky or Lenin who said, when an autocrat's in power, his demise seems inconceivable. Once it's happened, it seems inevitable. I mean, that tends to be the way these things go. So, one can never say for certain if and when Putin, is, going to go. Nor is it clear what, if he did go, he'd be replaced with. But there is clearly considerable instability and uncertainty in the system.
And do you think, finally, that this sort of open appeal to disaffected Russians to come over and betray the Putin leadership, is that going to, do you think, add to the sense of unease in the Kremlin?
Well, possibly. I think C mentioned that, hinted that some Russians may already have taken that decision. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't see that there's any harm in feeding the paranoia that is already very evident within the Kremlin.